This week's episode is sponsored by Narragansett. If you want to be like Quint Jr. in Jaws 19, then crack open a cold Narragansett on a hot summer day and head on down to your local store to grab a 12-pack today. Narragansett. Warning: shark attacks may happen to frequent drinkers.
Welcome back, people. Welcome back to Crosscut. I'm your co-host, Chris.
I'm your other co-host, Josh.
And as last week we started with the Back to the Future, well, guess what? Back to the Future Part 2 is now. I watched this last night and fell asleep to it, so I had to finish watching it today.
No, that's not a good sign. How this
Uh,
episode's going to go.
hey, I mean, come on. I was watching it around midnight. I fell asleep. I was tired. Give me a break. Once I put it on and started watching it, I'm agreeing with you where this is probably the best sequel ever made. It literally takes place right after the first movie, minus a few actor changes, but the amount of things in this movie that have come to life in real life, as far as technology. I mean, you have everything from hydrating pizzas in an oven to go bigger. That can happen, still does. Or like what was another thing that Skype, for example, Zoom, that was in Back to the Future too. The clock tower, since it's still the same clock tower, still has the same chip. You
Mm-hmm.
notice that.
Yeah, and it's a little fried on the top of the clock area.
So I like how they kept that detail in there. I like it more because it's more futuristic than the first one. Because all you have futuristic is a time machine. This time you're actually going into the future. You're seeing everything, like even the thumb scan that happens now. All of those technologies came true today.
So going back to last week for some context. So at the end of the episode, I said Back to the Future Part 2 is my favorite of the three movies.
Yeah.
And it's always been my favorite ever since I first saw this movie. Way back in the day. Uh, if anybody watching this can relate to this, please let me know. I am curious. The first time I ever saw this movie was on the Disney Channel.
Disney
Yeah,
Channel.
the Disney Channel in like the early, like probably like 2000, 2001. And this was probably because the Disney Channel was still young
Hmm.
and they didn't have a lot of content. This is right before your Lizzie McGuire's, Even Stevens, Hannah
Right.
Montana's, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody's, and they were still kind of in the early phases of the Disney Channel original movies. So I think they had a lot of space for content that they needed to fill. So they actually, I believe they licensed a lot of outside non-Disney movies, and this just happened to be one of them. So I remember watching this for the first time, funny enough, on the Disney Channel. And from the first time I ever saw this movie, it definitely became one of my favorites for multiple reasons. And then again, that's not to say anything against the first movie. I think I still love that first movie. It's again trying to pick between your two kids. And then the third one, which we'll talk about next week, I've come to enjoy a lot more over the years. But Back to the Future Part 2, just each like third of the movie is something new and something unique. Whether it's
Yes.
them going into the future, whether it's them going into alternate Biff's 1985, or
Mhm.
whether it's them going back to 1955, which I think is my favorite part of the movie because what this sequel does, and I think this kind of started a thing with sequels, is that it went back to the first movie and we
Yeah.
are able to see things from like a different
A different
angle. And I just remember
perspective. Yeah.
thinking like how cool that was. And then for them to obviously from a filmmaking standpoint recreate all that, try to get even like I was watching the one scene where it's Marty watching himself after his dad just punched Biff and he's kind
Right.
of watching from a distance and Marty runs back to the gym because he's got to do the song, and he kind of runs by two people, and there's one lady in like a red dress, and there's another guy, and I kind of want to go back to that first movie and just see if it was the same two actors, the same background actors. I don't know for a fact. I'd
Hmm.
have to do it, but I'm just curious of like did they put that much detail into it because that's probably one of the best parts about this movie is how much they could recreate and nail it to a T from even the opening scene, which Chris is going to start off on.
Yes. I agree. It's so detailed. Like, yes, even how the movie started, recreating every last scene from the first movie. I mean, yes, it was a different actress, and but every single angle is the exact same one. Even his mannerisms are the same exact mannerisms.
And I bet back in 1989 when there was like internet wasn't a thing, I bet most audience goers didn't realize the actress had been recast. Like I
No?
bet you they didn't realize that. Some people were probably like, that seems like it, but I bet most people were like, yeah, it's probably the same person.
Yeah, I didn't even notice at first, but the first couple times I watched it, I guess, because I didn't notice it at all until like, wait a minute. When I watched it when I was older, I was like, that's not the same person. She looks different. But yeah, because they did it so much the same without changing nothing, you wouldn't notice at all.
So this scene basically picks up from the end of the first movie where we do see Doc come back and he is basically telling Marty and Jennifer that they got to go into the future because it's about his kids. And this kind of brings
Mhm.
up my first question. I have two questions of the
Okay.
movie that kind of popped up. And then basically this is where it leads us into 2015. And this isn't even really the inciting incident. Everything that happens with Griff
Yeah.
and all that doesn't that's not even the inciting incident. The inciting incident in this movie is when that guy tells him and he gets the idea for the almanac. That's when everything really kicks off, in my opinion. That's
Hmm.
when it goes into like second act. But my first question is, and this one has probably more of like a understandable, probably like explanation, but could Doc Brown just not have forewarned Marty in 1985 instead of taking him into the future? Because I thought he had this whole principle of like
Not
not
messing with
changing
it.
things.
Right.
And I wonder if he thought it was different because, well, it's different if 1985 is considered our present. It's different if it's going back to 1955 and not changing things. But if it's 2015, technically it hasn't happened yet, so we could change it. But I was just thinking, like, could he have not just forewarned him in 1985, like, hey, on this day, your son's going to do this thing, and it's going to cause a whole chain reaction
Mhm.
of things that are going to really affect your
No.
family.
Yeah.
Either just don't have a kid or just make sure your kid stays home that day or something. I don't know. That was a thought I
No.
had.
But yeah, you're right. He could have just forewarned him, just like he did in the first movie, that the letter to Doc Brown that he was gonna get shot would have been the same thing if he had told Marty, and 30 years later, all he had to do was intervene with his son.
But would you remember for 30 years that specific thing?
Well,
Because this goes back to the first movie. Why don't Lorraine and George McFly remember who Marty is in current day?
Marty. Such a nice name.
And the directors, the filmmakers explain this because after 30 years, if you don't have a photo of somebody and there's no social media, there's no internet,
right,
you
right,
would
right.
not, that person would become like a dream, like a foggy memory at that point after
That's
30 years.
true.
So I'm just wondering if it's the same idea. If Doc had forewarned him in 1985, would he have
Would he have
not
remembered?
also maybe forgot 30 years later? So that was maybe my one reasoning to why. Um,
Okay.
or maybe Doc is just like, I don't want you to wait 30 years. Let's just go right now and let's take care of this.
Which is
And
true.
it's
I
just
mean,
a
and
just
he
happens
tried.
to work out that your son looks identically like you.
Yeah, that was the big plus. But he still kind of, still wanted them to prevent them from seeing each other, their future selves. And I mean, in a way that didn't happen, Jennifer doesn't count. It was just a shock. It was like a dream, like he says, and didn't cause any ripples or anything like that in the future or in the past, because she would have thought it was a dream. But what if would it still be a dream for her if it went back to normal 1985?
I don't know.
Because
I'm not sure.
that just gave me that idea, because all this happens and then alternate 1995 happens. But when they fixed it, it all goes back to normal. They didn't remember a thing. Yeah, he said Arnie and Jennifer wouldn't remember a thing, not even as a dream.
No, I mean, I think they would still have like a dream feeling because if you ever seen Donnie Darko, it's kind of the same idea where he kind of erases everything that happens and he goes back in time. But the ending of that movie is all these characters kind of waking up from this dream that they thought they had, but it turns out it was actually them realizing that they lived this thing, this alternate lifestyle. But that's sort of a time travel theory. Watch
Yeah.
Donnie Darko, you'll get it. But now we are in 2015, which is weird to think because that's fucking 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, so I watched this movie twice today, actually. I watched it regular, and then just for the hell of it, after work, I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna listen to the movie just to like pick up on like little details, and I did. But first off, just from like a visual perspective, just talking 2015 alone, obviously paying attention to detail. You already talked about the one. This is the first time I noticed the clock tower. Um, for
Same.
some reason, I guess I never really paid attention to it before, but yes, it's still stuck on 1004. It's got the little like fried. You can see it like the clock tower's kind of burnt still.
The ledge
The
is
chip is still
missing.
there. Yeah, the ledge is missing.
It
And
says
then
courthouse.
I also noticed that the courthouse is like a mall now.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pick that up? So,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, what's interesting is the scene after Marty's trying to escape on the hoverboard and he's over the water and he jumps
Yeah.
off. After they're all getting arrested, he appears from the underground tunnel, and I think there's like a sign that says it's like an underground shopping center, which I thought was kind of interesting. I never really noticed that before.
I don't remember what it said exactly.
So that was just something I picked up on. Another couple things I want to talk about real quick.
Mhm.
Did you ever notice, and this is something I realized because of a video I watched on the movies. So you know the guy that gives Marty the idea to get the almanac? It's the old guy. He's like, I should have put some money on the cubbies.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
guy. Do you know who that guy is? Because he shows up later in the movie.
Wait.
This is something I never knew until maybe like a couple weeks
He
ago.
shows up in
So
the same movie twice.
he shows up in this movie later. Okay, I'll just tell you because I don't think you're gonna figure it out. So his character's name is Terry. He's the
Okay.
old guy. If for people that are trying to think who he is,
Save the
he's
clock.
the one that, yeah, he's that guy. $100, so inflation.
Yeah, right.
So his character is the mechanic in 1955 that's going back and forth with Biff over the $300. It's the
Oh,
same character. And another reason I know this specifically is there's a deleted scene of the older version of him telling Marty about how him and Biff back in the day hassled this one day over $300. So it's the
oh,
same
okay.
character, which I thought
Okay.
was cool. Also, the actor Charles Fleischer is the voice of Roger Rabbit.
Please, don't mind me.
Oh shit! I didn't know that.
So there you go, a little tie-in because
All
Robert
right.
Zemeckis obviously did Roger Rabbit a year before this, which you probably already noticed this. There's a Roger Rabbit doll sitting in the windowsill of the
Oh, the cut,
nostalgia shop that he
the
gets
antiques. Yeah.
the antique that he gets that. So that was just a cool little detail. If you also notice his dress or his not his dress, his shirt, and
Mm-hmm.
this goes back, and this actually goes into Marty 19 or 2015 older Marty when he comes home. They have double ties. Did you ever notice
Yes.
that?
Yeah, I
That's
did
kind of
notice.
an interesting look.
Doc Brown had a clear tie too when he was at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
That was something different.
A
Uh,
couple more things.
mhm.
Unless you had something, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So while listening to the movie, I noticed this about Marty's and Jennifer's marriage. And there's actually a lot more there than you may even think of. So first off, there's the two female cops that bring Jennifer home, right? The
Right.
younger Jennifer. And they make a reference to Hilldale at the time. It gets full of tranks and
Yeah.
lobos and zip heads or something, she says. So I think those
Mm-hmm.
are supposed to be like terms at that time for like people that are maybe like abusers or like use substance abuse, I think, or something like that.
I think that's what it's implying. Yeah.
So if you notice in the kitchen scene, if you actually listen to it, there's a conversation going on between older Marty and his mom about where Jennifer is. And before Marty comes home, he's talking to his daughter. Lorraine is talking to her daughter, played by Michael J. Fox.
Right. Right.
And she's telling him the story of like what happened to her dad. He got in the accident. He was never the same. They got sued by the Rolls Royce person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Lorraine is telling her granddaughter she thinks Jennifer only married him because she felt sorry for him. Did you ever notice that? So there's actually a parallel
Okay.
between Marty's parents and him when he's older in
Yeah.
this movie. And I never noticed that before.
I did not until you just said that.
And I only knew that because of I was just listening to it,
Mhm.
not even watch, just listening to it. So yeah, if you rewatch that kitchen scene before
Mhm.
older Marty comes in, Lorraine talking to her granddaughter is basically telling her the story of what happened to her dad, and she basically says, "Yeah, I think Jennifer something happened. I think they just got married because Jennifer felt bad for her." And then if you even watch that scene, Michael J. Fox is so excited, or Marty's so excited that they're living in Hilldale. And Jennifer is kind of appalled. She's like, "Oh my God, we got married at the Chapel of Love."
I get married in the chapel of love?
And she just is like so appalled by all this.
Yeah.
But Marty is so excited. So there's just a lot of difference there. And then
Yes.
finally, um, you know, in the kitchen when Marty's home, the mom asks her, like, where's Jennifer? She's like, "Oh, I
Like,
don't know,
oh,
where
she should have been
she's
here
having one
hours
of her
ago.
mood. Well, he says she's having one of her moods.
Right. Yeah.
And then there's a deleted scene that older Marty goes and sees older Jennifer knocked out after the two see each other. And he goes, "Oh my God, she got tranked again." So I'm thinking like there might be something going on there. It's very interesting. Just
Mm.
a lot more than I
Well,
thought that I ever would have
okay.
thought before I'd seen this movie.
So in that sense, yeah, you can tell that they're having some issues with each other. They from the very beginning when they got married, but I wonder if it's because of the car accident. Then he,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah,
so
that's no, she literally says it that the car accident and then he hurt his hand and that basically
he
his whole
wouldn't
life
have
would have been
given
different.
up on his music. Yeah,
So yes, I obviously just like in the first movie, his life changes for the better, his dad's
right.
life changes for the better. And that's what I'm saying is it's the parallel of Marty in this movie is that we'll see this obviously in part
His
3.
parents, yeah.
His life is going to change for the better as well.
And then there's of course the most product placement is in the house.
Pizza Hut.
It's Pizza Hut. I even wrote it down too. You got like Pizza Hut, you got Pepsi, you got Black and Decker, AT&T,
What
Nike.
on the "you're fired" letter it says like Cisco I think or something like
No, it's
that.
AT&T.
Oh, is it AT&T? I
Yeah,
thought I saw
the
Cisco
fax.
on something.
No, when the fax that Jennifer rips off, it says AT&T.
On the machine or on the piece of paper?
No, on the machine it says
No,
AT.
I'm saying on the piece of paper it says Cisco.
Oh, it did?
I think at the top it says Cisco.
Oh, okay.
So just another one.
Well, yeah, then you have uh a Black and Decker where she hydrates the pizza.
Hmm.
There's Pepsi.
Which
And
because of this movie, I've had that pizza from Pizza Hut, the half pepperoni, half green pepper pizza.
nice. And then you have Nike, of course,
With
and
the
the power
was it
laces.
power laces? Yeah.
Power laces, all right.
And there's
And
another funny little line that Griff has in the diner where he
mhm.
goes, "Hey McFly, your shoes unbelted or unbelt or something like that." Like instead of saying untie, he says like
Right, right.
unbelt or unbelt or something like that.
And I don't know if you noticed, but the where the jacket and power laces are, the little like tube. Uh, you know what brand this says on the tube?
No, what?
Foot Ear.
No. That's good.
Like sponsored by Foot Ear. And then uh I can't remember any other like really product placement besides Jaws and
Hmm.
the Cubs.
The Cubs, which they almost got that right. So in this
But
movie,
they
it's
almost won, right?
2015. So the Cubs actually won the World Series in 2016, not 2015 as in the movie. So it was a year later. Another thing that they actually kind of get right in this movie is that the other team is Miami, which at
Mhm.
the time Miami wasn't a baseball team; it was the Florida Marlins.
Okay.
But now they are called the Miami Marlins, so that is kind of right. The one thing though that does not make sense about that is that the Cubs and the Marlins are in the same league, so they would never meet in the World Series. So that is one thing that could not happen.
That worked. Oh, and Texaco was another big one.
Yeah, but that's already been in all the movies.
Yeah, true. True.
Just
Uh
the
Michael
like
Jackson.
I still can't believe they turned that backlot into that.
I
Like
know.
with the lake and everything. I'm just like, because I've been on that backlot. I'm just like, how did they do this? Like they must have just absolutely renovated the whole thing
Oh, I
because it just
imagine
looked
so.
so insane. And then they'd obviously had to change it back for the later scenes. So I don't know if they filmed the later scenes first
I have a
because of the
feeling
whole lake part.
that makes more sense to do like all the 50s shots first and then the 80s and then go to the future.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention about that sequence where he's getting chased,
Mhm.
I actually learned this on a podcast where the Griff has his three like thugs,
Yeah,
right? And one is a girl.
right.
I don't remember her character name. A couple things about her though. That actress also played the host in the Back to the Future The Ride video. So she's the same
Okay.
actress. And I learned that on this podcast, the Boy Meets World podcast, because she appeared on Boy Meets World. They had her as a guest on the podcast.
Okay.
She talked about Back to the Future Part 2. And that sequence, if you pay attention, she actually tells the story that her stunt double got seriously injured in the sequence where they go into the glass into the
Oh,
courthouse. And if you pay attention, right before it cuts to them hitting the glass, her stunt double hits the pillar. She like clips it, and that's how she got
yeah.
hurt. So it's still in the
Oh,
movie. But
damn.
if next time you watch it, right before they go in the glass, watch her
Uh,
stunt double. She's gonna clip the pillar, and she
yeah,
got
and she
really hurt
goes,
from that.
she spins, right?
I don't know if you see her some maybe, but in that specific shot, you can see her actually hit it, and she got like really injured. And then like I guess years later, that actress saw Michael J. Fox on the street and just went up and was like, "Hey, remember me?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, didn't you get hurt that one day like really bad?" And
Mhm.
she was like, "No, that was the stunt double." But I just thought I would kind of mention that because you know, anytime stunt people get hurt, I want to at least
Yeah.
make people aware of it. So
Here for the stunt double team.
yeah, they. I remember the filmmaker said that they'd be happy if they got like 50% of their predictions right. They said like we obviously know we're not going to get everything right. We know that there's not going to be flying cars. Although that was like another little touch where it was Goldie Wilson the third was selling the
Yeah,
hover conversions or whatever
I
they
saw
were.
that. Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, that explains why the cars can fly now because he sells them, and yeah,
Right.
that's cool.
Right.
So,
But
anyways,
I think most of them are true. Even the flying car that exists.
I've seen videos of like stuff like that. Yeah. Not to the extent of this movie. Speaking of the future, so Biff gets the time machine. He goes back in time.
Yep.
He goes to do something. We don't see what it is exactly. He comes back. He's kind of like injured or looks like he got hurt. I never truly understood why that was. But then I finally realized that,
Is the
oh,
king.
his character is disappearing because he changed his
Ah,
own past. That
yeah.
version of his older self wouldn't be there. So that's
Wouldn't
what I
exist. Yeah.
always thought it just like he got injured because he came back through the time whatever. But no, I
I
think it's
always
because
thought
there's
he was.
actually there's a deleted scene where you actually see him disappear in that shot.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. That makes more sense actually, because I always thought he was just injured because he broke the cane on himself. It's like, oh, okay, no, he like stabbed himself. That's
Yeah,
what
no,
I
I
thought
think it's
he was
because he's
doing.
actually vanishing. Like his existence is gone
That
basically.
that makes more sense. Yeah, because yeah, he's there is that future would not have existed, right?
Yeah. Also, here's another question that I even have written down, but I'm going to ask it. Who mated with Biff to have a family? Because Biff obviously has offspring. He obviously had a
Oh
son, and
yes,
then that son had a son named Griff. Who was the lucky woman that actually did
hey,
end up marrying Biff?
probably someone exactly like him.
I guess we never got to meet the fortunate soul, but there's another question. That is kind of a funny thing is just to see the different, depending on what how your life turns out, just the different personalities Biff has throughout. And he pretty much is introduced right away as the villain. He
Yeah,
sees the DeLorean flying, which first off, Doc Brown, you're smarter than that. Why the hell are you flying it in the neighborhood during the
the
midday? Like
same
go
Hill
somewhere.
Valley.
Yeah. But basically they do introduce that Biff is going to be the villain throughout the whole movie, and that pretty much is the case. So that brings us to alternate Biff's 1985. Take it away, Chris. What do we see?
Alternate 1985. Marty is walking into a nightmare. Everything is his world is upside down. I remember watching that as a kid, where he's walking down the street. There's like the chalkboard
Yeah,
of the.
that specific shot
Mhm.
made me fall in love as a 12-year-old with set design and like practical sets. I love that look because like I feel like you could be on like a Universal ride or just
Yeah.
like an old school movie set where they had all the burnt up cars and yeah, the
Mhm.
chalk layout of the dead bodies. I'm just
Yep.
like, oh,
Yep.
that's a movie set, and I love that.
Well, I mean, as a kid, because of the music, also, it made me kind of like, whoa, he is in hell. Like I was starting to feel
They
what he's
even call it
feeling.
Hell Valley. That the sign says Hell
That's right,
Valley.
yeah, Hell Valley, Mr. Strickland.
Right, Mr. Strickland. Speaking of music really quick, I would say even though I do sort of like this one a bit more than the first one, that was the one thing I noticed. This movie just doesn't have any unique music, whereas the first movie obviously had so many iconic songs.
Mhm.
If anything, that this second one just kind of recycles the same
Yes,
iconic music from the first one, but it didn't really have like any new songs I noticed. It just had kind of the
it's
same
more
ones.
just instrumental than anything else.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
So a couple things about this thing that I this alternate
Hmm.
Biff's 1985 that I noticed. And I guess I never really realized this. So his casino, where everything kind of takes place in this second act,
Hmm.
is where the clock house was, but I never knew that,
Yeah.
or the clock tower. I never realized that because obviously it just looks so different. But then when I was listening to it, there's the narration guy when Marty's watching the video that
Yeah.
actually says the casino's where the old clock tower used to be at a clock house. So
Yeah,
I
I
was like,
remember
oh,
that
okay.
part. Yeah.
And I guess everything just kind of makes sense to keep it in the same location. Like it's just
Hill
iconic
Valley.
that everything is in the
Hmm.
same area. So wherever the clock house was, but everything just looks different. That was
Hmm.
one thing. The other thing, I never brought this up last episode. So Marty sees the homeless guy, right?
Oh yeah, he's
And he
still there.
recognizes him from the first one.
I don't remember his character name. I forgot it.
So his character's name is Red.
Red, yes.
Did you know this? And I forgot to mention this last week. Did you know that that character was the mayor in 1955? He
Oh.
was the mayor in 19. So if you go back to the first movie, there's when Marty first gets there, there's a car that pulls by
With
that says
the
"Vote
picture
Mayor
of the
Red Thomas" with the picture of the guy.
yeah.
That's Red, the homeless guy in 1985. Yeah, I
I
forgot to mention that last week, but I just a fun little attention to detail as well.
damn. But I wonder how he became homeless. Is it because he incited he put the idea into the new mayor, I guess that eventually becomes in the 80s or
What do you mean put the idea in? You never see him in 1955. That's the coffee shop owner Carruthers or whatever his name is, but that's not Red that's telling him to be mayor.
no. When in the first movie when Marty is in the cafe,
Yes.
he said and he said, I'm gonna clean up the city. Yeah, that's right, because you're gonna be mayor. I wonder if that he gives him the idea to become mayor, but if he because of that he runs against Red and Red goes his life goes
Oh yeah, yeah,
downhill.
yeah. Yes. That is I think the idea is
Okay.
that he loses, but he obviously like is a disgraced mayor at that point and
Mhm.
becomes homeless. So
But I like his
there's a
lines though.
oh Red.
Yeah, because in the first movie he said crazy drunk drivers and alternate 1985 crazy drunk pedestrian.
Right, right. And I guess it just no matter what alternate 1985, I guess
He's
it just
always
never
there.
works out for him. He's always the homeless guy, which actually brings up another topic I wanted to talk about. So a little bit of a discussion I wanted to go over.
Okay.
Goldie Wilson becomes mayor in
Yeah.
1985. You see what the state of the town is in 1985, and it's not the best, right? It's
Right.
kind of there's graffiti and
It's
there's some
everywhere.
like adult video stores and stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? And there's an argument that did Goldie Wilson kind of make the town worse? But then you get to this movie and you see what Biff does to the town, and it's like way worse.
Way worse. Like the
So
only thing that's bright and shiny is his casino. Everything else is a dump.
right. So compared to Goldie Wilson didn't do that bad. Biff
Yeah.
obviously just destroys the town. The
Oh
school's
yeah.
burnt down. People are like at war with each other.
Hmm.
And this kind of brought up a good comparison movie is It's a Wonderful Life. Because
Ooh, that
when
yeah.
Mr. Potter in the alternate reality that George sees at the end, Mr. Potter's the owner of the town, you see that there's a lot of like sleazy shops and just like
Right.
stuff like that. And I wonder if this movie was making like a reference to that. We do get a lot of good foreshadowing to part three. If you notice, there's a couple lines or and even a visual reference. The one line is Doc Brown as
I've
they're
always wanted to go
leaving.
to the Wild West.
He says that, and then he also says as they're leaving their house in 19 or 2015, he said he wanted to also discover one of the other mysteries of the universe, women.
Right.
But
Women,
obviously that's
yeah.
a big
Yeah,
storyline in part three. And
yeah.
then did you notice the Clint Eastwood movie that Biff's watching
Yep.
in the tub
Yep.
is
And which
he's
why he gets the idea in the third movie.
exactly, which we'll talk about next week. But just
Yes.
wanted to talk about some cool foreshadowing for part three because I don't know if you knew this, but they actually filmed this one and part three back to back.
Yeah, I knew about that. Yeah, so Marty and Doc realize they have to go back in 1955 to get the almanac back to prevent Biff from creating this alternate 1985.
And
And
I
I was
like
like,
how Doc explains it too, where he's like, well, we can't you can't just you got to make sure that you like older Biff has to give him the almanac first, and
right.
then you have to like take it. Like I like how they explain all that.
How Marty gets the exact time to go, to go back in time. Because if not, they wouldn't have known when to go in to 1955.
I did have a question about that. So I guess they just didn't pay attention to it because always the bottom one on the time circuit thing
Mhm.
says where they just came from. Would they not have seen that it said November 12th? It's because it said November 12th at like 6 a.m.
Oh
Would
yeah,
they have not have
that makes
seen that
sense.
and been
Yeah,
like,
they
hey,
should have. That would have
but
been
I got
easier.
also like maybe you wouldn't have, maybe they just weren't paying attention to it because obviously Doc Brown doesn't even notice the cane until later. He doesn't notice it right away.
That's true.
So maybe they just didn't notice those things. But I thought at first that's how he would have realized where they went back to. But I guess no. And I do like how Marty just asks Biff straight up, like, where'd you get it? And I guess Biff at the time would be thinking like he doesn't know time
Probably.
travel's a This Biff doesn't know time travel's a real
That's
thing.
true.
So he'd be like, I guess I'll just tell him, fuck it, because I'm going to shoot him in like 5 minutes anyways. But
True, being the
he basically
classic
gives him all the
villain.
information he needs. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
and then again, Biff is stupid, so of course he's just gonna
well,
elaborate it out.
stupid enough, but still smart enough to know how to use a time machine without any instructions.
True. That yes, yes, he just got lucky.
I think 17-year-old Biff is kind of a doofus, but I think his older self is a little bit more wise and a little bit more clever.
He's more observant.
Sure.
'Cause, I mean,
Observant, yeah.
he is more observant because he in at the beginning of part two, he witnesses the DeLorean flying,
Right.
and that's when he recalls that, wait a minute, a DeLorean, a flying DeLorean.
And yeah, I like how that comes back in 2015 because that's really
Mhm.
starting to make the connection that Biff is going to be this villain. So he's the one that's going to be
Mhm.
doing all these shenanigans.
Yeah.
By the way, just have to talk about this for this movie. The achievement of technical cinematography of having two actors in the same shot,
Yeah.
mind blowing 1989.
Oh,
I mean, it still looks good today. Like
you
there's
just
still shots
can't
of that.
tell.
It looks amazing. And
You can't tell.
this this was like revolutionary at the time.
It's especially in the kitchen scene when, I mean,
Oh
it's
yeah, because there's like
Michael
three
J.
of
Fox,
them.
yeah, doing the
Right.
three people. Like, damn,
Yeah.
you do not notice at all
Yeah.
that's three different things.
And I'm sure there's a little bit of trickery. Like there's the shot where Jennifer's in the closet and she sees older Marty come in and Marty's talking to his son. I'm sure that was just like a stunt, like stand-in or
Probably,
something,
yeah, because
sitting on the
you
chair
don't see his
because
face. Yeah,
you don't see his face. But so there's probably like, they probably use a little trickery like that. But my God, like the scene in the garage with Biff and his older self, just looks
yeah.
so good. There is one, I will say, there's one moment that looked a little weird when Biff throws the almanac
Mhm.
and it lands on his older self's like lap. If you look at the almanac, it looks kind of weird. Like it didn't like the visual effect didn't render properly or something.
I did
So
notice that.
yeah,
I didn't notice. I was like, "Whoosh."
that's kind of like the one little thing that stood out. But besides that, just I mean, the scenes with Biff in the cafe, the scenes with in the 1980s cafe, the scenes with
Mhm.
Michael J. Fox, him and his like him looking at his son close up, like it was incredible.
It really is. That they did a good job.
Robert Zemeckis had this guy make this machine specifically years in advance, knowing that this is going to be something they're doing in this movie. That's what I learned on one of the behind the scenes featurettes. Because I
Right.
think he was working on Roger Rabbit, which, by the way, Roger Rabbit has some incredible visual effects in that movie. So
Oh
that probably
yeah.
started some of this technology that he was going to use in this movie. But when he
Mhm.
was making Roger Rabbit, I think he told his visual effects supervisor, like, "Hey, I go start now, create this invention for this." It's like a little, it was like a huge camera, it looked like a big robot that they used for this movie to do this kind of stuff. And then yes, there's old school trickery where they, if you watch the scene in 1955 where Marty's in Strickland's office
Yeah.
and he sees George in the background and he's fighting Biff.
Yeah.
I think some of those shots are from the original movie, and then some of those shots were recreated. Like I think
Yeah.
there's one shot where it's George helping Lorraine get up. I think that's from the original movie. But
That
then it
is
cuts
it.
to them walking away, and I think that's like new footage.
Yeah, because then he has to go through with it all. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, this movie is just absolutely
Yeah.
probably still my favorite sequel of all time.
And speaking of all that, being the same character in the same scene, I'm pretty much gonna be doing that for my movie.
Being the same person in the same scene.
I'm the main character, and I'm also the alien in the final shot. So
And you're
that's
gonna be
gonna be,
both of you in the same shot.
yeah,
Okay.
that's what I'm gonna try to do. It's gonna be interesting. I've never tried that before, so I'm hoping it turns
Well,
out all right.
good luck to you. Enchantment Under the Sea dance.
Enchantment Under the Sea dance.
I think
Yeah.
this is where my favorite part of this movie comes in. And I think it's just the idea of recreating an
Mhm.
entire huge part of another movie. And again, seeing it from different
Yes.
angles, which is so cool, getting all these actors to come back. I mean,
Yeah.
just the amount of difficulty that must have been to just recreate the gym, recreate the exterior of the school, get
Yeah.
those cars in there, get everybody in those outfits again. I don't know if you knew this, but Leah Thompson, they actually couldn't find the pink dress.
Oh,
The and she actually just had one of them. They had three in the original movie, and then and she kept one of them. And then when they were trying to recreate it for this or trying to find it for the second one, none of the costume designers could find it. And she's like, "Oh, I have one." So they were
that
able
was pretty
to
cool.
use that. Um,
Well, I mean, I imagine they also used some of the original footage, of like the close-ups of
that's
Marty playing the guitar and whatnot, and
yeah.
the audience as well. I mean, that's from the
But if you
original.
watch behind the scenes, there's like behind the scenes footage of Marty asking Robert Zemeckis or Michael J. Fox telling Robert Zemeckis like, "Oh, I played it with my right hand for this moment," and like stuff like that. So like he's still like, trying to remember how he played
Mm,
that scene 4 years earlier, which is crazy to think like that was
yeah.
4 years before. They all still look exactly the
Still-
same.
Oh
Everything
yeah,
looks pretty much identical.
from
Right.
the
Well, I like from a story perspective, you know, in 1955 in part two, his whole motive is to get that almanac. But
right.
then when he's in the dance, he realizes like, oh, these Biff's three goons are going to mess up my other version, which is going to mess up me getting back home from the
Hmm.
first movie. So
So
then
he
he has
has
to
to
help, but he
intervene.
has to do it without his other self even
No,
realizing it,
right.
which is amazing. Um, I feel like I've seen so many movie sequels over the years that have recreated this idea. Like example would be I don't know if you ever watched the Happy Death Day movies, but Happy Death Day to You, the sequel,
Hmm.
basically pulls Back to the Future Part Two, and they go back to the first movie. Which I don't know, I just love that stuff. Like I love it when you go back to the first movie, especially if it's like an iconic first movie. And Back
Yeah,
to the Future Part Two started that.
yeah, yeah. It's awesome to watch like that.
Or even like Avengers Endgame. Like, was Avengers Endgame not just a Back to the Future ripoff? Come on, admit it. They even reference the movie
They
in
referenced
it,
it.
and they're
Yes, they
bold
did.
enough to even say Back to the Future was full of shit.
So Back to the Future is a bunch of bullshit?
Well, fuck you, Avengers Endgame. You're full of shit. They literally do what Back to the Future Part 2 does, where they just go back to the original movies. And it's about time travel. I'm kidding. I love Avengers Endgame. That's
But
still
it's
one of the
true
greatest
though.
superhero movies ever. But
You have a
no, yeah, they
point.
literally are doing time
The
travel and
same
they're
thing.
going back to the greatest hits, right? Like that's the idea. Like,
Yeah.
let's go back to the greatest hits.
Marty eventually gets the sports almanac from him. So Marty has to get Biff because he's driving off already from the dance with his sports almanac in his visor.
Well, there's a little bit of that character development of Marty. He could have just walked away, but he got called chicken, so we had to go back.
Mhm.
And then that's actually a great scene if you think about it, because who hits Marty with the door?
Himself.
Marty. So it's himself shooting himself in the foot because of him going back being called chicken.
Yep.
Just great, beautiful, love it.
If it wasn't for chicken.
And this is just a thing of me as a kid.
Mhm.
So you've obviously been on the ride at Walt Disney World Magic Kingdom, Carousel of Progress, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the final scene in that ride? It's the future scene.
Yeah.
I always think of Back to the Future Part 2 anytime I'm on that ride and it's the future scene. I don't know why. I just like, as a kid, having seen both as a kid, I always just correlated the two together.
Okay.
So anytime I see Carousel of Progress, that scene, I always think of Back to the Future Part 2.
I guess it makes sense. It was made in the 80s, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I think they like revised that ride in like the 80s or something. And so, and then, yeah. So I always think of that. Just funny little thing, but
I can see that though. I can see how you would correlate them. Yeah.
right.
It's pretty similar.
So, Marty finally gets the almanac. He gets away on his hoverboard.
Mhm.
A great little use of the flags that get attached to the DeLorean. I also
Yeah.
never noticed that there's like green lights under the DeLorean. I guess I just never really like noticed that before.
I didn't notice that before either until right now. Like, huh.
Yeah, little
Okay.
green lights, so that's kind of cool.
Yes.
And then uh Doc disappears. He gets hit by lightning and vanishes. And I guess at this point, if you had never seen the movie before, you're just like, is he dead? I guess as an audience member, you would be like, did he die? You know what I mean? Like, did he just like
Mhm.
evaporate? But it's not until the Western Union guy comes to give him the
Yeah.
letter that you realize, like, oh, okay, he's still alive. And of course, they tease this. The time cap council or the little thing is flickering. It's like, oh, I got to get that fixed. And you can see it says January 1st, 1885 on there when it flickers.
1885. Mm-hmm.
So,
Like
great.
1885. He's in the wild. He's alive. He's in the Wild West, but he's alive.
So this does bring up, actually, before I do that, I always wanted to, I thought it'd be cool to do a short film that was about the Western Union guys leading up to them delivering that letter. And you would never know it was a Back to the Future like movie until, or like it'd be a short film,
Right.
but it'd be about these guys in 1955. They work at Western Union. They're like, oh, we got to deliver this letter. Today's the day. It's been here for 70 years. And if you're subtle enough, maybe people wouldn't pick up on it right away. And then the one guy's like, oh, let's make a bet. Because he says in the movie, says, I
Right,
lost a
right.
bet.
Oh, I guess I lost.
Yeah, so he'd be like, ah, I bet you he's not there. And well, I bet you he's there. And then he takes it out, and then that'd be the final shot, him pulling up, and then it's like, oh, it's Back to the Future Part 2. So I thought that'd be like a little fun short film idea. But here comes my second question, my second big question.
Okay.
I never really thought about this until today. And this might actually be explained in the third movie. So if it is in the third, because I don't remember, they might explain it in the third movie, then bear with me until the next episode. But why
Mhm.
does Doc Brown not immediately come back to 1955 to get Marty after getting struck by the lightning?
I was wondering that too. Like,
Yeah,
how? Because I know he runs back to 1955 Doc Brown, but
right.
still he's stuck there.
Why? That's the thing. I feel like in the beginning of the third movie, it's going to get explained that something happens to the DeLorean when he got struck by lightning. Because from what I remember in the third movie, he buries it for them to find in 1955.
80.
So,
Oh yeah,
no,
55. Yeah.
1885, Doc Brown buries the DeLorean
Right, in a
so that they
cave.
can find
Yeah,
it in 1955.
that's
But
true. Yeah.
why, if the DeLorean is still fine, why would he not just go?
Take off.
Unless something happened to the Mr. Fusion, Maybe that's what it is.
Okay.
Because that's like the whole thing in part two. He just uses Mr. Fusion to put the stuff in there so that
Right.
he doesn't need the
Well,
nuclear
think about it. It's
energy.
70 years, so it probably just broke.
No, but like if he immediately gets hit by lightning and he's immediately back in 1885, right?
Right.
It's like, well, shit, let me get back, let me just go back to 1955, back to Marty. Now I know he obviously like loves the old West, so he sticks around there and maybe, but it I don't know.
No,
Like
no, but see, he gets stuck in the 1885.
but how is he stuck? That's my question. Because if nothing's wrong with the DeLorean,
No,
why
no,
does
you're right.
he
You're right. No, you're right. And he chooses to stay. He gives up the DeLorean so that Marty can get back to his 1985 from
Okay, that's
19.
right. But he does tell him in the third movie. I know we're jumping ahead, but fuck it right now. In the third movie, he writes in the letter, "Don't come back for me." He says that.
Right,
Marty does it anyways, but he says, "Don't come back for me." So okay, so he leaves the DeLorean in the cave for him to
right.
find in 1955. But
He
again, why
uses
would he just not go? Why? Okay, why would you just not immediately go back to 1955, pick him up, drop him off in 1985, and then go
well,
back to 1885?
you don't know how much time he's been in the Wild West when he gets there.
And I think that's where I'm now that I'm thinking about it, because he has in the second movie he says when we get back to 1985, I'm just going to destroy it.
Right.
So maybe he gets back to 1885 and is like, "Ooh, I love it here, and I
That's what
don't
I'm
want to
saying.
leave." Yeah. Oh, so yeah.
Exactly. Like you don't know how much time he spent there as soon as he got to the Wild West. So maybe he grew to love it and he still sacrifices the DeLorean so he can help Marty get back to his own timeline.
And to be fair, in the end of this movie, we don't see what the rest of the letter says, which I think
Right.
they're going to explain in the third movie. And
Hmm.
at first, I'm like, is there like a technical thing with the DeLorean, or
But the
was it by
DeLorean is
choice?
fine. It is
Right. But if the DeLorean's fine,
the DeLorean is
no, yeah,
fine.
the DeLorean is no,
He
because
he left
in
the car
part
for Marty.
no, because in part three, he has to get up to 88 miles an hour. So I think it's Mr. Fusion. Remember, he's at the drive-in in part three, and he has to drive through the screen.
Yes.
So I think something happened to the Mr. Fusion, and that's why he couldn't go back.
Yes.
Because obviously, the reason he can't immediately go back in the original movie is because he didn't have the what was the nuclear stuff,
Plutonium.
the plutonium.
Right.
But obviously, in part three, he's going to go back to the old West, so he must have had plutonium somehow or something. But
Well, at that point, that the DeLorean that he hid in the cave doesn't use plutonium anymore.
that's what
Remember?
I know. But I'm saying in the third movie when he drives when he goes in the drive-in from 1955 to 1885, he's not using the Mr. Fusion technology though. Because then why would
No.
he be driving 88
No, he's
miles an
using the
hour?
train, remember?
I'm not saying at the end of the movie. I'm saying in the drive-in. Remember how he has to go from 1955 to 1885 in part
Okay.
3? What is he using to get there? Is he using Mr. Fusion or is he using
Uh,
plutonium? That's my question. So maybe
well,
something
it
happens to the
would be
Mr.
Mr. Fusion
Fusion.
though,
Okay, so
right?
then Doc must have just,
He
I
probably left it
guess,
charged up.
because he doesn't fly, he drives, but
Yeah, he drives it. No,
hmm,
yes. No, you're right. He doesn't fly it because he has to drive it.
he has to drive it.
Maybe he's literally just gasoline.
Because that's what happens in part 3. The Indians hit the gas tank. That's why he can't
Right.
drive anymore.
Right. So maybe he literally just needed he doesn't just need gasoline because he
All
still
right.
needs the 121 gigawatts.
These are all questions we're going to answer next week.
Yes.
We just went on like a 10-minute rant about, but it was a question that I couldn't help but like, why would he not immediately go back? So I know part 3 is going to answer that. We'll talk about this next week.
Stay
I think this would
tuned.
be a good place to, as a good to be concluded. This is where we should also wrap it up.
So if you enjoyed all of our back to back time travel theories of what happens from 1955, 85, 1885, and vice versa all over the place.
If we melted your brain for the last 10 minutes, then apologies, because I think I melted my own brain.
I know I have so many dates in my head going back and forth. So so stay tuned for Back to the Future Part 3 and everything will be explained, hopefully.
Hopefully. Besides that, thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button. If you want to subscribe to stay up to date for future episodes, please do. Speaking of future episodes, Back to the Future Part 3 in a week. Stay tuned for that as we conclude this epic trilogy of awesome time travel. But besides that,
Cup print, moving on.